All right, we'll call this meeting of the Brown County Commission to order. Commissioner Steiger, would you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning.
Morning.
Commissioner Feldheim is working on getting some corn to the elevator, so thoughts are with him. Hopefully he can get some done here.
Waiters on?
Yeah, exactly. First thing on the agenda, we got Deanna Harbert, Brown County Community Health Board
Good
report. Good morning. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Good. Is Gary gone already?
He is.
He is?
Yeah.
Oh, good for him.
We'll see.
I'll be missing him, huh? Okay, so we're reporting for July, August, September. I guess I put it in there wrong. July, August, and September. Kind of business as usual in the summer. Family Planning did secure some funding. We are going to transition over to electronic medical records. So we've been in the process of training, and we'll go live with that the first working day of January. WIC, the only news I have for WIC is our nurse did apply for a WIC grant, and she did receive it, $5,100. It was a nationwide grant that she did secure. With those dollars, we're providing mobile WIC services, so we are able to pack up and go into someone's home that doesn't have transportation. Sometimes we have preemies that we don't want to bring out into the community, and we can go in and do WIC services. We've gone into the grocery stores and set up shop there, and then at the same time can help, especially our non-English speaking participants, we can help them with their shopping. It's difficult for them to navigate the stores and those kinds of things. We did have our POD exercise in October. We had 250 doses for college-age students. We way underestimated our need. The year before, we had only given 100, so we went with 250, and we ran out of vaccine about an hour and a half into the exercise. So we were, unfortunately, had to send quite a few college students someplace else for their vaccine.
Is that free of charge or $20 or?
Yeah, I don't know. They'll have to go into a private clinic, or they'll have to go into a pharmacy, so it'll be out-of-pocket expense for them.
So, but the ones you gave
They were free. They were free, yep. School services, we did contract with Warner and Hutterville again this year. Frederick declined, so we went in the fall and did school screenings for Warner. We will go back in the spring and do puberty, and then we'll go in the spring to do Hutterville as well. Haven't seen much for influenza. As of October 12th, there were only 7 confirmed cases, no reported hospitalizations or deaths. We are vaccinating. Today we are providing a walk-in clinic from 8 to 6 at the office. Vaccine is $45 for adults without insurance and $20 for children. We do accept Blue Cross Blue Shield, Stanford, Avera, and Medicaid, so we can file for insurance if they have that. And then I think West Nile, I think they stopped reporting sometime in October. We saw very few West Nile cases. There are only about 10 in the state, none of which were in Brown County, so for the first time ever, I think. But we did have positive mosquito pools. Bright Start is a program I've mentioned to you in the past. We do have a nurse that actually case managed pregnant women and babies up to their second birthday. This is for first-time moms only, and she does have a caseload of 22 at this time. She just started about a year ago. So, any questions?
On your on the WIC caseload, do you see that going up or
We
down?
always see it go up and down all the time. It really fluctuates. So about 700 is about our average.
Okay.
We've seen upwards of 800, but we've seen into the 600s as well. So it really has stayed pretty steady.
So it's not something that's just constantly going
No.
up?
We do have a lot of eligible participants that are not using WIC. We do know that, so we do look at ways that we can market that program, and we're hoping getting out and being visible in our grocery stores will help with some of that. Yep.
What's the gestation, or how long normally for influenza if you have it? Is it like a week long, or because it's not these quick 24-hour things?
No, generally you're sick for about a week. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Any other questions, comments? Well, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I'll see you
Thank
in
you.
3 months. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, I think we're close enough. Next on the agenda, we've got the 2018 Financial Audit Closing Conference. with Department of Legislative Audit. Are they with us?
Yes.
Good morning, how are you guys?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good.
How about you all?
We're
Good.
doing well, so far.
Oh, you'll be good, that's right.
Okay.
Well, as I promised in the entrance conference, I told you we'd be back when we were ready to close, to meet with you again. There really isn't a whole lot here to discuss. I just got to get my papers organized here. I heard you say the compliance audit for calendar year 2018 is done. Your audit report, you'll get an unmodified opinion, and there'll be no written comments. So that's all very good. But there was items that we did still feel that we should let you know of via our management letter, and I will hand that out now. I think you all got one in your packet, but I will just make sure that. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you.
I don't know. I have an extra one, but I don't know if you guys all want one, or if, no?
They any questions for me, so
You want one?
I'll do that.
Well, you can keep it. I made it, it's an extra one.
And when I'm done, I can give you this copy too.
So the first thing we'll do is I will kind of go over the management letter. The first page is just basically general language discussing, different types of deficiencies. And then you get down to the bottom of the first page. It talks about deficiencies noted in internal control. Item 2 talks about on the second page, violations of laws, rules, regulations, and provisions of contracts and grant agreements. And number 3 talks about the unadjusted proposed audit adjustments to the financial statements. We call that our lead schedule of potential audit adjustments. And I'm not going to go over all those with you. There weren't very many. And those are on file in the auditor's office, so they're free for you to review. She does have a copy of those, and I've gone over all those with her. So we'll go down where it talks about deficiencies noted in internal control, which are material weakness or significant deficiencies, which are included in the schedule of current audit findings in the audit report. As I already told you, there's none disclosed there. There's nothing. Deficiencies noted in internal control which did not rise to the level of being a material weakness or significant deficiency, yet important enough to merit attention of those charged with governance. In this area, we have one. Number 1 is we noted many improvements in the internal controls related to the operation of the Brown County Fair. However, we did still note a few internal control deficiencies that could be improved upon as follows. The overall documentation of reconciliation of total sales on the ticketing system to the receipts deposited with the county has improved from previous years, although additional improvements can still be made in investigating and resolving variances. We recommend that the overall reconciliation of the ticketing system to what was receipted in by the county treasurer at the end of the fair include investigation and resolution of variances. The next item is the county has contracts with local nonprofit organizations to operate the clubhouse, beer gardens, and the grandstand concessions. We found inadequate supporting documentation was provided to the county fair office to properly document the county to the county fair board, or the county fair board received the appropriate amounts from the contract. We recommend procedures be put in place to ensure the proper amounts from the contract are received by the county fair board. This is the support that comes in after the fair is done. It's invoices and it's support for the money that was receipted that ultimately ends up at the treasurer's office. It's better, but it's still not to the point it probably should be, and we really can't eliminate any of these until it is to that point. The third one here is the contract for the operation of Centennial Village was adhered to for the audit period. However, this contract did not require supporting documentation to support the revenue they receive on behalf of the county like other contracts with the local nonprofit organizations require. Further, the annual report submitted to the county from Centennial Village as per contract needed to be reworked by the county auditor for clarity.
We recommend the county strengthen internal controls over the revenue received on behalf of the county by Centennial Village by requiring supporting documentation for this revenue through the contract with Centennial Village. We further recommend Centennial Village provide more clarity and ensures the accuracy of their annual reports to the county, including showing calculations so the information can be easily recalculated. Is there any questions or comments or discussion that you want to make on this?
Going back to the second one on the beer gardens, I don't think it necessarily states that in this paragraph, but does it have to do with the amount of contract and the amount of money that the county actually received off the contract, or is it more how as the money come in, how it was vouchered or accounted for?
It's not once it got here. It is prior to that. I mean, they're supposed to, like, the contracts talk about you get a certain percentage off of the beer sales, and based off of the invoices, I don't know, you can probably help me with this. There was invoices where after we calculated the revenue that should have came in,
there was some incorrect calculation.
yes, exactly.
Done by the organization for the most part.
And you made note of those so we can go back to them with the correct
yes,
calculations?
yes, the
Okay.
county, Derek has more detailed information that's what's in the management letter, yes,
Good.
of what we found and what our variances were when we recalculated what should have come to the county versus what did come to the county.
Okay.
Based off of the revenue that based on the calculations that should have been done based off of the contracts. And I don't remember. They weren't big amounts, but they were still. I don't know the one.
I don't remember the exact amount.
Right,
They were minor, but it was still incorrectly calculated.
Sure.
And it's almost something that we recommend, like, we reviewed it, which I understand it was reviewed, but maybe the calculations weren't done correctly again. I'm not sure, but.
Okay.
So it's something, a spreadsheet with formulas would take care of.
Well, there was a spreadsheet with a formula, but if you mess with the formulas and you don't go back and recheck your formulas, that doesn't. Formulas aren't always the answer unless they're locked down.
Okay.
So the procedures are in place, it's just we need to, how they're followed a little bit more?
Well, that or maybe recalculate, and I think some of that's being done, but recalculate what they're sending in and making sure that what's coming in per the contract is actually what they're providing, and then maybe the fair or somebody does a recalculation of their information.
Sure.
And I think some of that is done. I think it was just...
The procedure, what she's alluding to is they didn't properly formulate when they were figuring out the per keg. It happens on the percentage model, not necessarily on the keg model. The challenge is they don't actually settle up with us. They've been settling up with the commission assistant in the past, so by the time we receive the information, sometimes it's 6-8 weeks. So it gets missed. So, and it's already deposited at that point, so you know, kind of, if they would settle up with us, we could run through that calculation with them at that time, and it would speed up the whole process, so. Okay.
Gotcha.
The next section of this is material violations of laws, rules, and regulations and provisions of contract and grant agreements which are included in the schedule of current findings and audit report, none disclosed. Immaterial violations of laws, rules, and regulations and provisions of contract and grant agreements, none disclosed. However, we did note other less significant items through our course of the audit, which we discussed with management. If those are called what we call our oral comments, and we don't feel that at this point in time they needed to be elevated to the management letter. If they don't get improved upon, or I will usually give a department once we find something, because a lot of times those outlying departments, you only see them once every 3 years. We'll give them a chance to correct something before it actually goes in the management letter. If they ignore our recommendations or whatever, then we will bring it to the attention of we'll bring it to the attention of the board. But we will give them a chance to, to fix it before we just, automatically put it in the management letter. So, like I said, we did have items that we did talk with other departments on, but at this point in time, we left them oral comments and giving them a chance to correct. And we will check when we come back that they are correcting what we recommended. So with that, are there any further questions in relation to what is on the management letter, or any questions on how the audit is going to play out, or the audit report?
On those oral comments, is that noted somewhere? So with turnover and stuff, can we see those as well? or
The
not?
auditor has a copy of everything. Yeah, and she's got the whole list, and then I guess, this isn't required of us, but this is something that I do. I will give them a written document of all the oral comments that I made per their department, because if it was me, I'd want to be able to see something, not only hear it, but actually be able to see it so I could refer back to it to make sure that I was cleaning up what I needed to clean up. So each department got a list of the items that we discussed with them orally, so that they can look back at it and you know, make the corrections.
And we can follow up too to make sure they're taking.
Yes,
the
and
proper
like I said,
action.
Kathy's got a list of all of them.
Right,
Yep,
good.
Yep. And some of them will fall under, and on that thing, it'll let you know that, which items we considered basically related to a item on the management letter. And, it'll either, basically say it was a management letter item, or it'll say it was an oral item, just so that they know where it ended up as far as the audit was concerned. Any other questions, or?
Anybody else?
No, not for me.
Then, I always have to ask a question, is if you want to respond to the audit, but because you have a clean opinion and no written comments, I guess I'm not sure if there's anything, I'm assuming you have no response. Then we also require that it's called the representation letter, and these came out with your packets.
Yep.
It's the normal letter, basically, talking about the audit and whose responsibilities were who, and that, that you don't know of any fraud, and so I'm guessing you probably had a chance to read it. So it's basically it's the same rep letter, just basically saying that you're responsible for your county, and that you don't know of any of these things going on. And so with that, I would need somebody to make a motion to sign the representation letter.
So move.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion on that? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
I will let you sign as the board chairperson, and then the auditor needs to sign.
All right, any other questions or comments? Anything for us, guys?
I do have something that has nothing to do with necessarily the CY18 audit. I will let you know that the budgeted hours were 400. The actual time that I booked was 411 hours after taking into account training, and we gave 31 hours of assistance, and as if you remember in the entrance conference, assistance hours you're not billed for. The extra 11 hours over budget was due to payroll testing, and it was due to testing, the first 3 quarters prior to the RAM, and the last quarter was the RAM Enterprises, so we kind of had to develop some audit testing and some extra testing because of the 1 quarter being RAM Enterprises performed the payroll. So there was a little extra there. I never see the final bill, so what Russ and Marty decide to do with what I put in for hours, I guess you'll find out when you get the bill. I never see that part. That's after my portion. The other thing that I'm going to just bring up is because I've been asked this question at Brown County a few times, and it deals with the budgeting of IT equipment, and whether you leave it departmentalized or whether you go to budgeting at all at the IT line. I have been asked the question by different people within the county, and I know it was asked of Dave because he passed it on to me. Dave from our department, before he retired, it was passed on to me. In talking to Russ Olson, which is my audit manager, and then Rod Fortin, which is the local government audit manager, we can't, how you want to do it is a management decision, but you kind of have the three options. You can set it up as an internal service fund. There's pros and cons to that. There would be, and I don't know if the time and effort of accounting for an internal service fund and then the reporting requirements of an internal service fund would be worth setting up that, but I guess that, you could look into that more in talking with Rod, and the hoops you'd have to jump through in doing an internal service fund. You can leave it as is in that, in the county accounting manual right now, the budget line 171 is for basically IT central service type items that aren't easily separated out to departments, or it just doesn't seem time-wise to allocate that cost out. It doesn't seem reasonable. So in the county accounting manual, this line 171 for IT expenditures, the way it is right now is that it's like for servers, okay? You got a server, you don't need to allocate that out to all the departments. That would get coded to this budget line IT. Software that's countywide, to leave that budgeted at IT. And this is the way it is right now, but that's not saying that with the progression of technology and maybe more counties or local government actually having IT departments. I don't have a county in my area that has an IT department. They basically, they're software providers for their accounting systems. That's usually who they go to for their IT services, whether it be Ultra, a connecting point in Watertown, or Tyler Technologies. That's kind of their IT. And so their expenditures, other than servers and software that's used countywide, is coded to the 171 line. Otherwise, the purchase of monitors, computers, copiers, faxes, whatever, is all department by department, and the department is budgeting that. So that is the way it is now. That doesn't mean with the counties that do have IT departments, like Brown County. I'm not sure. I think Minnehaha County has an IT department. I think Pennington County has an IT department, but I'm not sure how they're doing their budgeting. I think it all still is at, that something that isn't easily segregated is taken to the IT line 171, but each department is still budgeting what they want for IT type equipment. It can still be bought through an IT department, but at the time it comes in, the invoices would let you know pretty easily how you could segregate that out to departments, and then it would be budgeted at the department. So that's two ways, and the other way would be to budget everything at the IT line. So your options are internal service fund, still budget as you do now by department for the IT stuff that can be split out, or budget everything at the IT line. Now, there's pros and cons to all of these, and as far as a countywide versus a IT budget versus the way you're doing it now, and it's split out where it can be to each department. A countywide system, this already qualifies to be budgeted at the IT line, so I guess, I kind of call this a pro, but it's already qualifies. A server or software already qualifies to be coded to the 171 line. Time and effort in allocating costs between departments, I guess I kind of call this a pro, but again, if computers are being bought for like the sheriff's department, allocation of the expense in this instance would not be that time consuming because it's all spelled out on the invoice. It would just be a matter of putting a different code on it. Instead of just being able to code it to General Fund 171, you'd code it to General Fund 211. So the coding on the invoice, that's not very time consuming. You're having to do that all the time anyway, whether it be for IT equipment or any other type equipment. The cons, I guess the cons to going to budgeting everything at the IT line versus, splitting it out is who's going to be responsible to approve the IT purchases? Will department heads have any say in when they need to buy IT equipment? Or will this be to the discretion of the IT department? And then another con would be you lose the true picture of what it costs to run a department, especially those that require a lot of technological equipment like the sheriff jails or communication departments. If all of their, of course those are the departments that have a lot of this, IT type equipment, are you going to lose the picture of what it really costs to run a sheriff jail department or a 911 center or whatever? And then we've got this SDCL that requires personal property inventory filings with the county auditor's office every year by the 10th of January. If all the purchases get budgeted, purchased, and placed by an IT department, it would seem that they would be responsible to the responsible department to maintain the personal property inventory listings of what they have purchased and placed. This could pose a problem, and it wouldn't just pose a problem here at Brown County, it would be all counties. It just seems like there's departments in counties that seem like to be notoriously bad, not for a better word, it's just bad at performing this duty in counties. And it happens to be, sheriff jail departments, IT departments, communication departments, and in the case of Brown County, it seems like it is your sheriff, IT, and communications departments that are the worst at complying with this SDCL and having these filings in on time and having them accurate. I want to further reiterate that this is a very important item, SDCLs to follow, because this is the accountability for all of this equipment out throughout the county that's being bought with taxpayer dollars. And there's some pretty strong laws applicable to these, and for good reason. Basically, 524.1 requires the annual inventory of personal property required of local officers and employees. It says, shall annually on the 31st day of December or within 10 days thereafter make in duplicate an inventory of all the public personal property. 524.3 basically states that at a county, employees shall file one copy of their annual inventory with the county auditor. There's a lot of times that the county auditor's office in any county gets a bad rap all the time, and they just think that they're asking for stuff that really isn't any of their business or it's not necessary. Well, there's nothing in the county auditor's office that they're doing that isn't necessary, and this is one a lot of times that they'll think, this isn't necessary because they're not up on the SDCLs, and it's the one any department, just think about it, any business, whether it be a government or whether it be a private business, this has to be the worst job at the end of the year, is to do your personal property inventory listing or an inventory count at all. But it's very important, and especially when you're a government and spending taxpayer dollars. 524.6 talks about civil liability of an officer for failure to account for the property. If an officer or employee disposes of personal property without complying with the requirements of this chapter, the officer or employee, in addition to the penal penalty prescribed by law, is liable for value thereof as shown by the last preceding inventory to be recovered in a civil lawsuit. 524.8 says, failure to account for public property as a misdemeanor. Any officer who fails to comply with any of the provisions of 524.1 to 524.7 inclusive is guilty of a Class 2 misdemeanor. I've never seen a county go to this point, but it's in state statute. If you would want to, if a county would want to, on somebody that repeatedly does not comply with this STCL, that department head that's responsible for turning that into the county auditor's office could be, found guilty of a Class 2 misdemeanor, if you want to push it that far. So I guess, those are the kind of the pros and cons. I guess it's still ultimately going to come down to what your county decides to do, you know, and those are your three options: an internal service fund, you know, code everything as much as you can by department, or, you know, budget it all at IT. But again, you know.
Well, I don't think it's an all or nothing deal,
Oh no, well, I didn't.
because it depends on what the items are, what the technology is, and it continues to evolve.
Exactly.
For
You're
instance,
exactly
we are in
right.
the process of migrating from having individual computers
Right.
with their hard drives to having centralized servers with very few exceptions. So basically, most of the terminals are simply an interface, and all the information is stored and accessed on the servers. So the bulk of the processing and storage and all the rest of that stuff is centrally located on the servers, and basically all you have is just access with a monitor and keyboard to those servers. So you've got a lot less investment. You also have a lot more capability when it comes to those individual departments, and depending on the technology and how it integrates with different things. So it's not an all or nothing kind of a thing. There
I
are
guess
a lot
you-
of things
right.
that are allocated back to individual departments that are still centralized because of the integration of all of the different components that go into it.
Right, but I think the questions that are being asked is that, you know, was from what I understood is that you were looking at coding or basically wanting to budget every type of IT type purchase at the 171 line, like faxes, copiers, monitors, and we did look at that system that you just put into place, because that was one expenditure that, because of the way the county accounting manual is set up right now, and that's why some of this discussion was had even within our department, is that this system that you put in, we did look at it because we're thinking, okay, it all got coded to 171, was that really proper? And we determined that that was proper because it was more central and a lot harder to, just like a server. Well, it basically was kind of like a server. Basically, all that's going to be in a department is a little black box. So the bulk of what's going to happen is going to be sitting in the IT department. So that is a legitimate cost for 171 right now, the way the accounting manual stands today. But like I said, you have the other
And
option.
if there's things in our policy manual that we need to update in order to keep up with that, that's something that we need to take
Yes,
responsibility for.
Exactly. Just like I said, because this question had been posed to me several
Yep.
times, and to Dave also, I just wanted to talk about it, and it's just stuff for you to think about, I guess. Just keep you thinking on what you want to do and how you want to handle it, and then if you move forward, it might be something where you need to adopt different policies, and yes.
Well, let me ask you a different question, if we're good with that.
Okay?
From an accounting standpoint, when we have these investments in technology, and we do now, and potentially having relationships with other entities, accounting for some of those expenditures, where we would also be getting reimbursement. So for instance, we have a relationship with the city for EMS and dispatch and those kinds of things.
Okay.
They make a contribution to our efforts, both, you know, that's a combination, the way it's allocated, it's a specific dollar amount, but it goes both, you know, in the fund towards salaries as well as equipment and those type of things.
Okay, so on the accounting side, that's coming in as probably a contribution or some type of intergovernmental revenue.
Are you asking in relation to the centralized purchasing?
Yeah, how does it,
So if
how
we
does that?
centralized purchase, say in the 911 center, that budget wouldn't include those IT expenses. So the city's 50% share wouldn't be paying for the computers in the 911 center.
Unless-
It would all be county general fund out of the IT department. So if you wanted the cost share to cover true costs of the department, such as computers, monitors, all of that stuff, you have to code it and budget for it in that fund, in the 911 fund. So that's where the centralized purchasing is in conflict with, say, the 911 fund, as far as having a true cost and true bill to the city for half the cost of that department.
And see, I think, you know, even though they're coordinating it, and as you said, the IT department can be involved in the decision-making and the purchasing.
Exactly.
It can still be coded, and in fact
Exactly.
is, in many instances,
Yes.
being allocated to those. So
One of
you
the
have-
challenges we ran into is, you know, say IT department is budgeting for centralized purchasing, and then the assessor's office is budgeting for their IT equipment. Now we've double budgeted for the same purchase. So having a clear policy in place on how we're going to proceed with this will help with budgeting.
And
in that aspect.
I think that's
Yeah.
where it's really important that the communications is there as well.
Yeah.
In the coordination of things, because we've also had situations in the past where department heads have purchased things autonomously on their own that don't integrate with the other things that are going on, and that's not appropriate either.
Right, the key is communication, and as all of this technology evolves, right, communication is key.
So it's kind of tied our own hands, because there's certain software, like Mike was saying, that, you talked about the fax machines and the photocopiers, that only certain vendors can provide that with the Square 9 and things like that, that we inadvertently tied our own hands and can only go through one vendor. It's kind of a catch-22.
Well, I don't think it's so much the vendors is allocating the expenses out. I think on a department by department basis, where you can identify where those ongoing expenses are, those are being allocated appropriately.
So I see where she's saying the disadvantage is that your department heads don't have the say, because we can't go through certain places where they might want that particular piece of equipment because it doesn't interface with what we're doing.
Well, that's the whole point. They may want it, but if it doesn't play with the rest of the system, then that needs to be worked out.
But then I think it comes down to cost effectiveness. I mean, you get yourself backed into a corner that you've got no choice but to buy from a certain vendor because of how it's tied into the computer system, or do you leave it open for each department head to be able to purchase and buy a fax machine or a copier or whatever that might, in all reality, do everything that's needed to be done and probably cost the taxpayer less money, but because you have the IT department in control of the whole thing, they're able to create a situation where they can only buy off a certain vendor.
Well, I don't think they're creating the situation. The situation's being driven by what's out there, whether it's switches, whether it's MDT terminals, all the rest of those kinds of things. I mean, I know that that's an ongoing progression right now, is that because there's been a little bit of autonomy that was left out there unintentionally, we've got all kinds of equipment in our emergency responders vehicles that's not uniform. It can't be transferred from one piece of equipment to the other, and so there's an ongoing effort to bring that back together so you have a consistent group of equipment that can be used and plays well with the rest of the system, as opposed to, well, we can't, this one's out of service and there's nothing else we can do about it.
Yeah, so the question isn't should we or shouldn't we use IT to buy equipment. Obviously you want IT's opinion before you purchase something to make sure it's compatible. But the question begs, then if IT buys monitors for the whole county, do we do a multi-department voucher, or are we going to a system where it just comes out of IT and then IT tracks inventory for all of that and is responsible for all of that? So the question just begs, where are we going to have the responsibility on the equipment already purchased? Who's going to do the inventory and who's going to pay for it? So that's the question, and that's the policy that needs to be decided, because right now that's a very gray area. Some people are having IT buy stuff, some people are budgeting for stuff. So it's just, and there is some time involved in doing a multi-department voucher. It's not a lot, but there's also time involved in doing the inventory, So that's just where the question begs, is how the board wants to proceed with what would be easiest budgeting, what would be easiest accounting, and what would be easiest for inventory. And so if inventory were to be spot checked and one monitor was unaccounted for, that's where the SDCLs could potentially apply. Now, I don't see us going down that road,
They're pretty strong SDCLs, but they're there.
Yeah, so those are just the basic questions.
But they're there for a reason, because all that personal property inventory that's supposed to be being maintained and kept track of, if there's something missing or somebody doesn't want to account for it, all of that was purchased with taxpayer dollars, or for the most part, taxpayer dollars. And that's where government is different than private enterprise. They're going to want to know how their money was spent, and if we come and we see that these personal property inventory listings are lax, it could end up as a written comment in your audit report for noncompliance with personal property inventory laws. It can happen. That I have seen happen. And once the public knows that the items that are being bought with their money isn't being maintained, or not, shouldn't say maintained, but being accounted for per SDCL, you might get some pushback from the public, yes. And rightfully so. I mean, so anyway, I just wanted to bring it up because it was something that was brought to my attention, or brought to our attention more than once, so.
Well, from an inventory standpoint, actually, you know, if you've got networked terminals and things like that, it's a whole lot easier to inventory, because if it's online, you can identify and run the list just right there and say, here's everything that's currently connected, and if it's not, it's in a box and it's
Stop by
sitting-
my office December 31st.
Yes, exactly, exactly.
I'll be here the day before, we'll do that.
You go out to some of these departments, and there's a lot of personal property inventory to be kept track of, and I don't know if one department would really want to keep track of all that. Just like I said, this isn't a popular thing at the end of the year. Just ask any county auditor. It's not a popular thing, but it is something that has to be done, and is required to be done, and is important to be done. Because this, now that you're reporting on the modified cash basis, this is your, I mean, this always was there when you were on the full accrual basis too, but at least on the full accrual basis, your fixed assets or your capital assets were on your financial statements. And I don't think that that's necessarily, I mean, that you went modified cash basis, I don't see that as a problem if this FDCL is followed and complied with, because there's your monitoring of items bought with taxpayer dollars, rather than having to put it on the financial statements, a full accrual financial statement that is more complex and more time consuming to put together. You get the same information. I guess if these are being complied with, actually having capital assets on your financial statements to me isn't, you know, it's great, but I don't know if time and effort if it's necessary if these other SDCLs are followed.
Sure.
Very good.
All right. Any other questions on that? Thank you for the information.
Yep.
Thank you.
See you next year.
Yeah.
You bet.
I don't know if you'll see me, but
See somebody next
you'll
year.
see somebody next year.
All right, that brings us to the end of our regular agenda. I'm going to turn it over to you, Kathy, for some of that stuff.
Okay, we have minutes from the general meeting, October 22nd.
Move.
We've got a motion and a second from Sutton and Weiss. Any discussion on those or changes? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed nay. Motion carries.
HR report.
So move. Second.
Motion from Piker, second from Sutton. Any questions on that? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed nay. Motion carries.
Claims and payroll.
Move.
Motion from Sutton,
Second.
second from Weiss. Any questions on that? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed nay. Motion carries.
Landfill air quality permit renewal.
So move. Second.
Got a motion from Piker, second from Weiss. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed nay. Motion carries.
Claim assignment.
Move.
Second.
Motion from Sutton, second from Piker. Did everybody get a chance to read through those? Any questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed nay. Motion carries.
The only other thing was just to touch base on the county vehicles, what to do with Gary's car. Right now it's temporarily at the assessor's office. It needed a few minor repairs, because they're just going to take care of it as long as they can have this on to them.
I think that's a good fit. They're the ones that are out and about more often than other departments, so I think just assign it to that department for upkeep and use.
And if somebody else needs it, they can contact them and...
Yeah, they can just contact Polly or Jean and check it out for the day. and
Should
get
they
it
have
out.
busier than not times of the year where it might be available?
Yeah.
But, yeah, I'd
And
say
Jean,
just assign it to
maybe
them.
Jean could send out an email so people are aware of that.
Sure.
Is that all right with everybody?
Yes,
All right.
okay.
That's everything that auditor's office has.
Okay. Ross, did you have anything for us, or Erica for Jack?
Short exec, I've got a little bit of everything.
Okay.
Pending, proposed, and contractual.
Okay, Dave, did you need us?
One second. Our heckler repeater is no longer functional. Just to make you aware of it, we don't know how this is going to all fit in the budget, but it's probably about an $8,000 problem that we need to try to fix. We are looking at some alternatives up in Hecla, where it's currently at is at the elevator. The man lift is no longer functional in there. The ladder is also broken. So our only way up there is by crane, which seems to be silly to replace or to change something that's not going to be a long-term fix. So Dakota Electronics is looking at probably a lot cheaper fix for us for a long-term solution. As soon as we know what that actually is, we will bring that back to you guys. We're just informing you ahead of time. It could be up in that $8,000 range to get it back up and going again.
Now, is that repeater just solely for the sheriff's office, or is it something that the highway department or other county repeaters might be in a situation soon that could affect the whole? In other words, what I'm saying is if the highway department's got a repeater somewhere separate, and if they're going to get back, have a problem at some point, is it something that could be tied together?
That's a good question. I don't have an answer to that. I really don't. I know this repeater is used for the first responders. I believe, and I could be wrong on this, I'm still learning myself, that the heckle fire, all that kind of stuff can go through that repeater. The repeater's over 25 years old.
How do we find out the answer to that? Whether
Dakota Electronics would have all that.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones that put it in.
Okay.
And they're the ones who are working through what we're also looking at doing, and that's a good point, is now everything's going digital. The current one up there does not do anything with digital.
Mm-hmm.
The new repeaters will automatically switch between digital and UHF, so we at least have some options available. We're looking at another tower a little bit further away that's actually taller, that would be able to give us some more power and to reach more of our county. And I don't know how that will work in with the highway department, but it's a good point. We're at the beginning stages of this part of it. We're using another channel right now that's able to get us by at the moment, but it's not a long-term fix.
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure what the repeater system is for the county highway department, but if, say, in 6 months, they have a separate one and it goes down, maybe there's something that, could be worked together.
And I'll talk to them about that too, to make sure, because if it makes sense, if we can combine it, that's great. If we can't, I don't know how that works up there.
Yeah.
So it's a good point though.
Thank you for the heads
Yeah,
up, we
Thank
appreciate
you.
that.
You bet.
All right, I would entertain a motion to go into executive session for contracts and possible litigation.
Pending and proposed litigation.
So moved.
Moved by Sutton, seconded by Weiss. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Just you right here.
Sure, we are back in session. No action as a result of exec. Anything else to come before the commission this week?
Move to adjourn.
Okay, we got a motion from
Second.
Second from Bikert. Is there any,
Thanks, Ross.
Yep.
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. We'll be adjourned till next week. Thanks, guys.